At the BizVision Conscious Business Academy, our consciousness agenda is both wide and deep. In our mind, the road to being a conscious business is a continuing journey. It's where you take your first steps that count. That's the power of intent. This week, Swedish retail giant IKEA announced it's to be a fully circular business by 2030 as it starts its rollout of second-hand furniture stores, encouraging customers to recycle their unwanted IKEA items. I wanted to find out, for you, more about a circular business. It's certainly in our consciousness agenda. I saw that one of my LinkedIn contacts was talking about his company's move to being a circular business. So I said, come and be a guest on the show. Is the director of Duynie Feed Group, part of the Duynie Group. Welcome, Jonathan Job.
Good morning, Malcolm. Good to be here.
Jonathan, before we move into your circular ambitions, tell us what Duynie Group does, the where and the how.
Duynie is a company for 50 years. We've been working to make sure that things don't go to waste. We take byproducts from the food, drink, and biofuels industry, and we recycle them into other industries. So for us, we don't see them as byproducts as waste, we see them as co-products. They are a product that's produced by the process of the primary product production. So across Europe, we handle around 4.5 to 5 million tons of co-product across 9 different countries in Europe, and we place them in markets from animal feed to higher value markets such as technical industrial glues, for example, and also now back into the human food chain. And we also support the renewable energy markets by taking some of these products and putting them into the biogas industry.
Now, as I say, I spotted your LinkedIn post about your sound move to circular. Talk us through how you see it.
As I said, Duynie for the last 50 years has based its business on being circular. We've always promoted that and been part of that structure, but it's never really had that name until the last maybe 5 years or so. We see as our business that the importance of making the food chain more circular is getting higher on everyone's agenda. When you consider that the global population is forecast to hit 10 billion people in 2050, we need to make sure that we don't waste food. The UN has already said that from their estimations that if we continued using our planet's resources the same way as we are now, we would need the equivalent of 3 planets to feed that population come 2050. So we make sure that we do our part by helping our partners in the food, drink, and biofuel industry become as circular as possible.
Interesting, really. Now, you have a great collection of inspiring actions. Tell us about the power of intention, what it is, and how does someone apply it?
Intention for me is it's the start of what the business wants to do. It can help define goals, but of course the goals by themselves don't actually generate results. You've got to make sure that the intent all the way through the business matches those goals, and it feeds through every layer. So what we did in our business, we created a 10-year plan, what we wanted to achieve across all our businesses and future businesses. And what our board did is they made sure they visited every single country, every company, every single person was presented to, explaining what the 10-year goals were, why the 10-year goals were there, to make sure that there was engagement all the way through the business. So it wasn't purely sort of a top-down diktat, but it was something that was explained through every position, so people really understood and bought into why we were doing what we were doing. Hopefully then you see it become sort of self-fulfilling, that if everybody understands and believes in why we're pulling in one direction, it will push it along, rather than it just being a goal on the horizon, but without any real understanding as to why or what that goal is.
I like that. Now, what prompted Duynie Group to want to achieve this goal? After all, it's a big commitment, so it can't just be a whim or a promotional idea. It surely has to come, as you just said, from the top.
Yes. When you've got the history that we have of sort of living and breathing circularity. It's the perfect time for us as a business, because now it's becoming higher on everyone's awareness, and certainly not just in a business sense, but just generally in society. You see the amount of articles and things that are written about waste and circularity, making more use ethically of our planet's resources. It's giving us a forum to promote what we've been doing for the last 50 years. So what it's giving us the chance to do is really expand on that and push it maybe quicker than we've been able to in the last few years, because everybody is now seeing the importance of it. And we believe that we can take advantage of this and push ourselves with our partners to make sure that those industries I mentioned become more profitable, but less impactful on the planet.
Excellent. Now, you can always tell when circular is becoming popular when there's a profusion of TED Talks around it, which there are at the moment. What challenges do you see in achieving your goals, and how do you intend to overcome them?
I think the nicest thing that we see is that there's a genuine belief and drive to want to change. So that's got to be the key, as you mentioned, the intent. The intent is certainly changing, and people want to be more circular. So when you've got that drive with businesses, that's more than half the battle. The challenges will come about changing supply chains, changing potentially infrastructure that has been in place for the last 20 years. Facilities that were built in the 90s or the early 2000s that were set up for a particular way of working, which now you have to change. And that all takes money, but it also takes time and understanding as to what you want to achieve. So I think the positive for us is that we're seeing people want to change, and people, it's not just lip service, there's commitment to it. But I think that the challenge will be the speed at which that change can reasonably be done. To make sure that it's sustainable for the long term as well, and not just a quick win and then something falls back into the old ways. That wouldn't solve a problem. We've got to make sure any changes we make now last for the long term, and also allow greater flexibility to keep updating, because the one thing we can be sure, the challenges we face today compared to 10 years time to 20 years time, they will be different again. And I think, so probably speed of change is the greatest challenge.
Yeah, well, sustainable change as well. Look, let's just stay with that supply chain and customer question moment. How do both your customers and your supply chain view your move? Do they concur, want to follow, shrug their shoulders?
No, I really, they concur. I think when you see the penalties that are coming across the board in terms of CO2 taxes that are being mentioned, there's a real drive to force businesses to change the way that they produce food, for example. So that's a change that businesses can sort of calculate. But also, I think we as a society, we are driving more wanting food that is produced in an environmentally sustainable and ethical way. So also then from from my point of view, our customers' point of view, the feed side, the farmers, they want to produce, be it milk or meat, that has less CO2 impact. And I think in time that could also end up being financially incentivized to them by the supermarkets, by the dairies and abattoirs, certainly trying to reduce people's reliance on commodities that are imported from South America, for example, making them look more to things that are produced locally. But yeah, there is a real want to do something, but I see our role as showing them how they can achieve that.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. The planet, people and profits agenda seems to really be taking a hold. What do you think the reward for Duynie will be with this excellent move? It doesn't have to be financial, does it?
No, of course. I mean, you can't shy away from the fact that finance is a big part of it, because if we don't make money, we can't reinvest to make sure our business can keep changing. to try and bring more opportunities to affect more change. So, finance is there, but the reason why I enjoy working for Duynie, and I know a lot of my colleagues the same, is that we work in a business that is very ethically minded, when what we are trying to do is make reduce food waste fundamentally. We want to make sure that more and more byproducts and co-products stay in the human food chain. We are supporting an agricultural industry across 9 countries to make sure that farmers can keep up with their targets and how they want to change. I take a tremendous amount of pride in that, because it's something that I can see the very real benefits of, that will help our planet become able to feed itself based on the resources we have, instead of keeping sort of pushing boundaries and having maybe a more wasteful society that maybe we were moving towards or had one foot in the water with, say, 10 years ago.
Excellent, yes. Now, in a recent interview I held in the USA with futurist Rebecca DeCosta, she said, and in her book On the Verge, that today's leaders need to learn agility and adaptation, but to forget trying to do it fast. They need to learn pre-adaptation. That seems sensible. If you know it's going to happen, why wait until it does? That is to do it well before it happens. Is this in your thinking? It's going to happen, so let's do it now. How do you see pre-adaptation working both efficiently and effectively for you?
Yes, I think you, excuse me, I think you have to constantly look at what you expect to be coming, especially when you're dealing in the sort of industries we're dealing in, which is manufacturing. It's hard for the manufacturers to make substantial changes one week to the next. As I said, there's infrastructure in place. There's often a lot of cost to go behind changing that infrastructure. So we have to make sure with them that we're looking at what's coming, to make sure that we're planning now to hit that target or be there for when that change comes. As our business, we spend a lot of time working with governmental bodies, non-governmental bodies, sort of cross-sector organizations, to try and always be aware of what conversation is happening, also to try and influence that conversation, so that we then from our business can constantly be aware of what's coming and making sure that we are set up for when those changes come. You're right, if you wait for the moment the change comes, you might be 50-60% successful, but something will get missed. And it will never be sustainable. You'll always feel like you're trying to put a plaster on something to hold it together. So you've got to try and make sure you're set up before it comes.
Almost like the hamster in the wheel, isn't it? Just before we move on to our final question, Jonathan, I'd just like to remind people on the screen behind me of your URL to pop along and have a look at the website and to follow through from this interview. Jonathan, I like to give all my guests 3 wishes. If I were to give you 3 wishes for how leaders should understand and move towards a circular economy, what would those 3 wishes be?
It's not an easy question that to narrow down it into say 3 wishes, but I would say really it would be for companies to really embrace it all the way through their organization. We see, as I said, it's coming more and more, and the people we speak to certainly are committed to it. But I think all companies to take it into their DNA, into their core. Circularity doesn't need to be at a cost. I think for businesses is again to understand that, to realize that they can do the right thing, move to a more circular way of working without it being at expense of the bottom line. So it'd be nice for people to understand that. And I would probably wish that governments would incentivize and push that change a bit quicker, because it's very hard for businesses sometimes to see the total picture. But if you've got the government saying, guys, we want to move towards this because we believe it is the thing we should be as a society, the way we should be working, then I think governmental support for those businesses will aid that process.
Jonathan Job, congratulations on what the Duynie is happening about circular at the Duynie Group. Congratulations and thank you for a great interview.
No, thank you very much, Malcolm. It'd be good to speak to you.